hoping to talk a little bit about eurythmy and stuff. Um,
Mm.
but one more thing in terms of astrology and stuff, I was really struck when your charts or the visualizations of the tonic scales, or however you want to say it,
The
the one that
modes.
looked like a, what was that?
The modes, I think. No, 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 go
Yes,
ahead.
modes. Yeah, modes. Um, the one that looked like a trapezoid, right? Where it was uh two connecting, and then
Oh, that one. So that was a major 7 chord. Yeah.
okay. So that really struck me with the idea, such that I'm actually going to share my screen really fast here.
Mhm.
Also, we got Mars and Cancer. I missed the exact moment, but Mars and Cancer now.
Lydian is not really a collection of notes. Um,
Um, this There's some interesting astrology coming up in 20 right here. This is July 2026,
okay.
and um, this is a pretty big rare aspect. And also in 2027, there's this, which is a grand trine between Saturn and Jupiter and the galactic center. Now, you were also
Oh,
talking about triangles in terms of like the dominance. Like I believe you said that this would be like a masculine type of
yeah. So
situation.
that so this would be an augmented chord. Here we should note that the augmented chord is also immensely dissonant in a manner which parallels what we saw previously in the tritone. An augmented chord has a perfect symmetry which prevents us from interpreting the constituent notes within an implied harmonic hierarchy. If we then mirror this triadic formation, we derive a double augmented chord, which then constitutes the whole tone scale. So this would be an augmented chord, which would be um, the point of greatest separation. The point of great, it would essentially be the bottom part of the descent on the hero's journey. Effectively, is the way that I've been conceptualizing it anyway.
Hmm.
Because that triadic structure is solar fundamentally,
I'm getting
and
very strong intimations of like winter solstice vibes, like Christmas, the light is born in the darkest night type of vibes.
right. Right. And so that's going to be something extremely tense that's going to demand some kind of resolution.
Hmm. Interesting
So
how interesting how
yeah.
typically the grand trine would be thought of as like a highly benefic, super flowing.
You would
Yeah,
think, because the way that astrologers think of this, they're thinking of it in terms of, oh, well, the soft aspects are good and the hard aspects are bad. But I think
very
it's more subtle
simplistic.
than that. The soft aspects are the 120-degree trine, corresponding to the major third, and 60-degree sextile, corresponding to the whole tone. The hard aspects are the 180-degree opposition, corresponding to the tritone, and the 90-degree square, corresponding to the minor third.
Yeah,
It's not really about the trying bad, hard, or excuse me, like soft is good and hard is difficult. It's more like hard is feminine, soft is masculine, and it's the imbalance between the two
that makes
that is
sense. Yeah,
actually the where the friction comes from, I would say.
fascinating. Yeah, that makes sense. I've been kind of intuiting something along those lines, but it's wonderful to have you kind of put it into language. Um, Very helpful stuff that you've been doing, man. I encourage you to keep it up. And then how about the other one? Like this one is blah, 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 blah. This is kind of um
Yeah,
uh
show me that trapezoid again.
yeah, it's a little bit less it's not quite so equilateral in nature, of course. However, it is still this isn't exactly half of a hexagon, you know?
Yeah, so show me the full screen that so that I can actually see
Sure,
what's
yeah,
going
this
on.
is it's all 4 degrees. Um and it's the three outer planets, and then Jupiter as
So we've
well.
got an opposition here between Jupiter and Pluto. We find ourselves unable to disclose a center of harmonic gravity because neither of the two notes can be experienced as privileged in relation to the other. We thus experience the tritone as a kind of unanswered question, and if that question remains unanswered, then the tritone feels not only tense but groundless. The tritone seems to demand a resolution, and meeting this demand tends to mean a motion into a new form of harmonic order, a different chord, in other words. And then, so that would be the equivalent of a tritone. So astrologers are definitely right for saying that is enormous. There's enormous amount of tension in that, even just by itself. If we continue the pattern, we create a diminished seventh chord, which consists of minor third intervals as well as two tritone intervals. Here again, we have another highly symmetrical and thus immensely dissonant chord structure. But then you've got, let's see, what would that be?
It's two trines, across the middle.
Yeah, trying to think what this would be exactly in
So this would
musical
be,
terms.
yeah, this is two signs are here.
So let me think. Hang on one second. Let me do
Yeah,
some
sorry. I'm just
really
excited
quick
to
Mintat calculations. Okay, so that would be a whole tone and then another whole tone and then another whole tone. So we could say that would be like C, D, E, F sharp. Okay, yeah, actually, there is something very Lydian about that, actually, because of that sharp 11 in there and the tritone and the major third. So anyway, yeah, this could be yeah, I would say that's actually kind of like an approximation of a sharp 11 chord, which does have a very Lydian thing to it. So that, even though that opposition is in there, because of the way that you've got this outline of that Lydian flavor, which is very bright. It's very that I would not necessarily think would be something absolutely catastrophic, even though like I think you might be tempted to look at that and be like, okay, Pluto is, this, there's a lot of uh, paranoia and anxiety and libidinality and violence in the Pluto, and then opposition Jupiter, which is also very expansive and potentially very aggressive sometimes. But this could be an aspect, this could be a constellating where that doesn't necessarily express itself in a destructive or negative way because of those trine aspects, which are kind of bringing it into an expression of a harmonic structure which is more benefic, you could say. It's not as like cataclysmic
yeah.
as it might look at first.
Wonderful. Interesting. So fascinating. I love this so much. Oh, I'm thinking it's so interesting. And two things come from that in my mind. One, far out uh reference, which is, have you heard of Robert Powell? He
I have, but I can't remember who that
he's the
is.
guy
Fill me in.
he's the guy who translated Meditations on the Tarot into English.
Yes, I started reading that. I have not made it far into it because I'm the worst at actually finishing things that I start reading. But yes, I am. I know
Gotcha.
who you're talking
No,
about. Yeah.
yeah. So okay, so he has this other book. Actually, have it right here. Um, uh, which is called The Chronicle of the Living Christ,
Yeah.
in
Okay.
which he did some fancy math and history stuff and claims to have, and it's also based on the visions of this mystic Catholic nun who claimed to have visions of the life of Christ. This is really far out. And by these visions, he claimed to have dated the events of the life of Christ to a T. And I made a video about this where I took the dates from his book. and I put them. He also uses like a different vernal point and stuff. Um, and I put this in. The tension just keeps building, but it's getting. I'm getting. There is a point in me bringing this up. Which is that. Where is it? No, sorry. This is taking a moment. The astrology. Basically, he by his calculations, however mathematical they may be, he um he says that on the day of the crucifixion was um a Jupiter Pluto opposition. Bada boom. So I don't know if that's true or not, but it just comes to mind as perhaps noteworthy.
That's
Um
interesting. I've also heard some people argue that there was what was it, a Saturn Jupiter conjunct, and that could have been like the Star of Bethlehem or
yeah.
whatnot.
That one you can yeah, that one you can like look that was in 7 BC, I
Hmm.
guess.
What was his date? What was the date he came up with? Is it still in the
April
same like range of years or?
Yeah, April 3rd, 33 AD, but again, he kind of uses like but in terms of the months and stuff, like they had different names for the months, and I think they were slightly different lengths and stuff. But he really, I guess this was like a 10-year project. There's all sorts of maps and charts in here and stuff. It's interesting. I haven't read it all the way through, but
That's
yeah, so that's
interesting.
one thing. Yeah,
Yeah, the Jupiter Pluto. Pluto is really interesting. Pluto gets a bad rap because it's associated with the id and whatnot, but Pluto Pluto is also, I would say, fundamentally what Pluto is. It's the archetype of separation. It's in polar opposition to Neptune. Neptune is the archetype of primordial oneness. It is the abyssal ocean. It is the womb. It is the undifferentiated state prior to birth. Pluto is the sense of division between self and world, and so that's why Pluto, out of that plutonic separation emerges the anxiety and paranoia, which are associated with Pluto, but also the libidinality associated with Pluto, which you could think of as a kind of a will to return to that Neptunian state. And also the regenerative powers of the body, because that anxiety also becomes a will to survive, to persevere. And so it's interesting there with the Jupiter and Pluto, because Pluto definitely within the context of, so that was so
crucifixion.
33, so that would have been the crucifixion, right? Yeah. So yeah, that's interesting. And then Jupiter's the archetypal father, and then Pluto is the ultimate separation. And that's kind of, I mean, that's what the crucifixion is. It is the ultimate separation, right? So I can see how that makes sense. Yeah.
Kind of wild, yeah. I mean, of course, neither of us know ultimately, but pretty wild. Um, yeah, this is
Father, why hast thou forsaken me? That's as Pluto Jupiter as it gets, right?
yeah, for real. I mean, yeah, so that's very interesting. I suppose while we're here, I might as well just considering that I don't know who else, I haven't really talked to anyone else who might, or actually that's, I don't know, anyone who might have such elaborate thoughts on it. So I might as well maybe show you another one um from this, which was that around the, I guess this is where the I think it might be the next year actually. The raising of Lazarus right here. This is, and also you can see some very interesting stuff as this Jupiter. This is a 3 times conjunction type of thing where it wobbles, like it does a retrograde wobble. So there's 3 exact oppositions.
Oh, wow.
And then uh and then this is after the second one. Um this would be the raising of Lazarus right here, like this little configuration.
So,
So
so with the raising of Lazarus, there's also is that a trine that's happening with the,
right there. I don't know. I mean, this is I'm for
hmm,
some reason I'm so hesitant to speak about this stuff, but I mean it's so that would be right there. Um
yeah.
it's a T square with the Saturn on the nodes, and then also you have the Sun and Jupiter trining the nodes. So that's one thing. And then there was a thing right here as this build. There was right there. I put in the other planets very briefly because you got almost a glimpse of the unicursal hexagram right there.
Yeah.
I don't
Huh.
know. So so that is that.
Huh. All right. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. Um, I don't know. So and then the other thing that came to mind, um, when you were talking about astrology is the idea of actually making music that corresponds to like the happenings or something. You know, like obviously it's not an exact science, but such that you would be able to determine varieties of chord progressions or like different modalities, right?
I think what you would have to do is something like this. You could take like a period of time and then do like a time lapse of like the astrological processions, and you would have to have the planets corresponding to different tones, and then you would have to have the zodiacal relationships. No, because that wouldn't work. How would you have to do it?
I think I think maybe not in terms of exact tones, but something about where like the different uh types of chords or something, or like the types of progressions. I'm not uh
It would have to be something like, it would have to be really subtle, because you couldn't just say like, oh, okay, Jupiter is the note F, and then Pluto is the note
yeah,
C,
yeah.
or whatever. Like it would have to be something where like the planets, what note they're corresponding to can kind of shift depending on the other stuff that's going on. It had to
Yeah.
be very complex. I'd need to work
Yeah.
with somebody who like really knows how to like code things like that
Yeah.
in order to try and cook something up. But it's possible, and it would be
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you know, people talk, you know, the music of the spheres, right? It's like, and that's what they would say in old times. It's like, oh, once you advance, like, then you can hear the music of the spheres. It's like, I don't know, maybe, you know, I've done a couple of videos where I put transits to music, and like, there will be some interesting overlaps where things click, and like the timing just happens to work out so beautifully. I'm like, I feel like there's more potential here. I would love if somebody would investigate it and stuff. So, yeah,
Yeah, I'm gonna have to think about exactly how that would work too, because then you got to also think of how the zodiac fits into it, and how that could maybe change like the texture of different notes potentially, or things like that. It would have to be I'd have to very meticulously cook something up and then get into contact with somebody who could actually try and
yeah,
code something like that. But that would definitely be a very cool project if I
yeah.
could
Do you
pull
think it?
that off.
Yeah, I wonder if it might like be also like useful in some sense, you know, like
Mhm.
and it maybe would reveal something about like the, you know, the types of movement where we are in the symphony, you know, and or like you know, maybe uh help somebody to connect with reality, you know, like yeah, it's very interesting. Um yes. All right, I have to
Yeah,
take
and
a
it's
breather.
really cool. It would be super cool if you could just have that playing continuously, so
Yeah.
that you could just like turn it on while you're doing chores or whatever, and like hear the shifts as
Yeah.
they happen. So you're not like sitting down looking at these charts and trying to calculate like, oh, okay, like Mars is gonna
Yeah.
ingress into Aquarius
Yeah.
on the 3rd at 6 p.m. Like
Yeah,
it
and
would
eventually
be
you would
like
yeah.
there,
Yeah,
you
and
know?
perhaps you would like eventually kind of gain the subtle ear for it, you know, and
Yeah.
yeah, and also
Yeah, it'd be kind of like biofeedback in a way, the way that people can like learn to be cognizant of their own heart rate,
yeah,
and then they can learn how to like lower it or heighten it
yeah,
at will. Like, yeah, I see what you mean, because then you could the music could serve as like a bridge where like even with the music off, you can kind of pick up on it, right? Because
yeah,
you've built that association. That would be really
yeah.
awesome.
I've always fantasized about like the ability to know the transits. So not always, you know, I've only been into astrology a couple of years, but like the ability to know where everything is. So like you know, because it can be very you know, just like you said, just looking at charts all the time. But obviously, in the olden days, people would go outside, you know, and look at, and they would have a sense for where they are in the pattern or whatever, however you want to phrase it. And but it's always interested me the idea that like you would be able to gain this time sense, like a sense for the pattern, and also. You know, there's people who you can just list off a date and they'll be able to tell you what the chart looked like. That, you know, it's I think that, I really think that there's something to be said for astrology as a technology that we are integrating. You know, like it's like I think this is a general occurring theme. I think as elucidated, I first kind of put the pieces together in hearing Griffin phrase it in this way. Although I've kind of been this is the way that I've been saying it as well. But the way that he said it really made it clear with the cube and like the idea of the technology integrating it, making it a conscious technology. And I think about that with astrology, and it makes me it makes my mind blow up because I'm like, I feel like there's so much potential there, and that's my sense is that astrology is something that we're kind of having to, not necessarily having to, but maybe even having to come to grips with and like to integrate into our faculties, you know, like because like you say as well is that we are all doing astrology all the time. You know, it's like we are inevitably synchronized with these things, and insofar as we don't engage with them consciously, they will control us like fate in a sense, you know. And it's like, and it also reminds me of you know, ye shall judge the angels, which is like, you know, the eye is above the astral, right? So this is like right now I feel like we're just like being ruled by the astral in a sense, but like there's a way where if we appropriately relate to it, then it no longer rules us. And
Yeah, and that's really the task of the present epoch here. Is it's not enough to just be kind of strung along by these things anymore, because it's like within prior epochs, there was always this kind of membrane, as it were, around human beings. You could kind of just let go of your ego and you know, go with the flow. A lot of Eastern forms of mysticism are oriented in this way towards just kind of submitting to a guru or whatever, a particular tradition, and just kind of allowing the sense of individuality to dissolve in a sense. And that was possible, and that was doable because the culture forms themselves had this kind of cohesion and this kind of history and this kind of memory to them that one could kind of let go into that in a way. But you know, if you do that in the modern world, you're gonna end up in a like cult, and you're gonna die because they're gonna make you drink the fucking poison Kool-Aid. Like,
yeah,
we're
or
just not in
plug
that kind of,
or inject whatever the fuck into you, you know?
right, and we're just not in that world anymore. We're in a world where we have no choice but to be doing this at the level of our own personal consciousness. And so that is our task, to become cognizant of these things, to develop these faculties. And if you don't, then you're going to get sucked into Ahriman. That's what's happening right now. Is there's this massive movement at a societal and a technological level towards the annihilation of the human ego. Everything about the development of human society at the moment is oriented towards the infantilization of the human ego so that it doesn't develop properly. This is why you've got, you know, babies playing with iPads before they know how to fucking speak. And that's only gonna get worse. It's only gonna continue, especially now that the medical industrial complex has realized that it can use psychedelic substances to make human beings more docile and mentally healthy. And like, they're not going to use that for things that are good for us. And if you think that, you're a fucking idiot. These
Yeah,
people are
even
not on our team.
yeah, yeah, even
And
weed. You know, it's like
yeah.
weed. A whole half of the experience with weed is the framework with which you do it. You know, and if it's like you know, it can easily be used as a tool, I think. But I smoke weed every day, but it's like, you know, I don't know. I think
When I was in my 20s, I did. The older I get, the more like any kind of mind alteration just stresses me out. I've heard other people say that too. So maybe that's just a
yeah,
thing about getting older or whatever.
yeah.
But in
How
any
old are
case,
you? I'm curious.
32.
32. Heard that. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
20.
I'm older than I look, apparently. Most people assume that I'm like 23, which is great. I would love to continue looking like I'm
Yeah,
23 until I'm 45, if
yeah,
that can happen
yeah.
somehow.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'll have an issue in that respect, and given that I'm 5'2", I'm a short laddie. So I'll be, you know, people will be asking me for my ID when I'm fucking 80 years old.
Hey,
Um,
and that's another thing that so Steiner talks about this, the way that he says
there's,
humanity is getting younger. And we are like
hmm,
physically, we're getting younger. I mean, if you look back, I saw this thing going around not too long ago online. People were posting this article, and it was images of the casts of popular television shows in the 70s and 80s.
yeah,
And you're looking at these people and you're like, okay, these guys are clearly, like mid 30s, mid 40s, somewhere around that. Dude, these people were like fucking 26.
yeah.
And
I
if
think,
you go back even further to like, I mean, you look at photos of people in like World War I, World War II, you're looking at these soldiers like getting ready to go off to war, and you're like, oh, these are like, people in their 40s at
mhm,
least. And like, no, dude, those kids were fucking 18 years old.
yeah,
And it's wild that,
yeah,
and people say this all the time about millennials, like people assume that we're still like in our 20s because we look young, but we're not anymore. We're all in
mhm,
our 30s now.
yeah.
And we just haven't aged as much. And so part of it, of course, there are going to be some idiots who are like, oh, it's all the soy and your testosterone is too
I
low.
think that's some of it. I think that's contributing in some sense.
That might have.
Even Steiner would have said that stuff like vaccines can introduce can interfere with the 7 year stages, right?
Well, but those 7 year stages are really what's more important here, I would say. Now it's definitely true. There's all kinds of things in our bodies with like chemicals and vaccines and microplastics and God knows what else that are fucking us up and making it so that we're more and more dependent physiologically on the medical industrial complex.
Mhm.
But in terms of us looking younger, I think what's really going on here is it's just a matter of how Saturn works,
Hmm.
because what Saturn is fundamentally, the way that it works within the natal chart, the cycles of Saturn are about the reincorporation of karmic contents which have already been developed in the past. And so the Saturn cycle recapitulates, right? So in evolutionary biology, they'll say that ontogeny, so the embryological development, recapitulates phylogeny, right? And this is absolutely true. If you look at these different stages, like using Gebser's language, the magical structure, the mythical structure, the mental structure, the perspectival structure, you can see how people go through these, and it happens in these 7 year
Yeah.
quarter turns of Saturn. And basically, what seems to be going on here is the more that there is to be recapitulated, the longer the kind of juvenile plasticity or the adolescent
Ah,
plasticity,
yes. I
let's
see where
say,
you're going with that. Yeah.
has to be maintained. It has to be drawn out longer so that there can be more time for those extra uh, phases to be recaptured. And
That
so I
makes
think
sense.
that's fundamentally
Yeah.
what's going on.
Yeah. I think it's probably a medley of both, but that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And yeah, maybe even maybe also like gene expression in terms of like the types of circumstances. Like we're not really having to charge into trenches and stuff like that these days. Um,
The more
but yeah,
adversity that you're faced with, the faster you have to grow up. And really, growing up can mean developing
yeah,
capacities and
absolutely.
faculties, but it can also mean solidifying.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like what you were saying there though. It's like that makes sense. And it also I think that's just a general human thing, right? Such that like humans in general take longer to kind of, people, even there's some animals where the baby pops out and they're like running off and doing their own thing, but kids, it's like, you have to, wipe their ass and stuff. It's like, it's like, because we're basically still, and, part of it is also that I guess like the birth has to happen earlier because like the size of our head, we have these big ass brains, right? And so we're still kind of like developing even after that's interesting. So maybe that like that humanness is kind of still happening such that we're even still like, I don't know, it kind of just extends out. I think there's something there that makes sense. Oh, I feel maybe we should save eurythmy and stuff for another day, or are you, I don't know if you're pressed for time. I would be keen to go into it. It's kind of up to you.
Uh, so yeah, let's go ahead and call it here, not because I'm pressed for time, but just because like I would rather have that conversation where when I'm like on a full tank of gas.
That's what I'm feeling too. Yeah, I feel like honestly, all the stuff that we were just talking about astrology, it's really exciting to me, and it kind of fries my brain almost, just because I feel like there's so much potential just buzzing in our so much the possibility space is packed with potential. um or something like that. And uh so I feel that, and I would love to do this again soon to, or I mean, I guess that was implied in what you're saying. I guess, I'd love to set that up for sometime soon.
Yeah, totally. Let's aim for I don't know, next week, week after next, however you want to do it. Just hit me up. We'll make it work either way. Nice chatting with you. Nice to
As well,
meet you.
man.
Yada yada. Thanks for watching all that stupid YouTube crap.
Yeah.
Um, all right, take it easy, man.